Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Welcome back, everyone, to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And I'm going to add a little bit to that title today. Incredibly fast human beings, faster than a speeding bullet, and certainly the fastest guy I ever saw on a baseball field. Legendary former big league outfielder Vince Coleman is our guest. Vince, welcome.
Thank you very much, Frank. I just give praise and thanks to our Father in heaven and through his son, Jesus Christ, for ever giving me the opportunity to play baseball. And because of that, it has really landed me in a great position of being with the Cardinals. And therefore, with the Cardinals, it was like a family there. And you was a big part of that. I mean, so I give all the credit, as much as I give credit to you was a teammate as well of mine, you know. So, and I looked every day for the inspiration and the guidance that you gave me.
Well, Vince, thank you, and I appreciate all you just said. But as you mentioned, we met in St. Louis, and I've mentioned many times on my podcast. My podcast is all about relationships and experiences, and I've been so blessed to have met so many great people over the years, and very interesting people. And so that makes it easy to line up a guest every week. And I'm really excited to have you on here, and I appreciate you doing it.
Well, that's what life's all about, relationships and friendships. And that, you know, you always go through ups and downs, but we had a lot of ups and great times over there in St. Louis. And, you know, those was everlasting memories that'll last forever, for a lifetime. And that's why we're here today.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So as I said, fastest guy I've ever seen. Now, I saw Vince physically about a year ago at the Cardinals fantasy camp when they had it over at Disney World. And ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, he looks just like he did when he was running out on that baseball field, even as a rookie in 1985. The guy's in incredible shape, 64 years old. It's hard to believe. Vince, how do you do it?
Well, you know, ever since I was a kid, I had this inspiration of just being an athlete. And I always vowed to myself that I would give myself a chance, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. So I always prepared for everything that I do. And so as a result, you know, I still think right around this time that, you know, I'm getting ready for spring training. And so I go to the gym 2 or 3 times a day. You know, I sit up some push-ups and that's just my mindset, you know what I mean, is that has put me in a position to stay in great shape. And, you know, I went vegan a couple of years ago, and so I cut out a lot of red meat, and I haven't had any alcohol, you know, so it has really served me well, you know. So I'm just hopefully that I can be an inspiration to others and let them know that if you want to live a long time, and I want to live as long as I want to live long as Methuselah, you know what I
mean? That's a long time. I tell you what, I think you could still steal a base if you had to in the big league game from looking at you the way I did anyway.
Well, looking at the game today, it'll be very easy to steal bases. I mean, you know, the pitchers and they're non-athletes out there. You know, I think that back in the day, you know, it was you going up against better competition, and today's athletes are not as tough minded as they are. They don't prepare the way we did. So, you know, I was blessed by being with Don Blasingame, you know, back in the day, and he taught me all the nuances of how to the pick up pitches and tips and tendencies and flaws, you know. So with that mindset, I came into every game knowing that I could steal a base because I had every pitcher's moves down, you know. So and the other thing that really elated me to be an exceptional base stealer is because the catchers would always set up in the middle of the plate on off-speed pitches, and they set up on the corners for fastballs. And so I can watch a game today and predict the pitches. So they'll never throw to first base with a gripping a off-speed pitch, you know. So those are the things that you equated and made you look like a genius when you was out there.
Yeah. Well, you burst on the scene in 1985, and you did it in a big way. You didn't even make the team right out of the gate. It was a couple weeks in, and Willie McGee and I think Tito Landrum both were a little bit banged up, and the Cardinals brought you up, and I think they even told you don't get a place because you're only going to be here a week or so, and you weren't having that. You weren't going to hear that, and you never went back to the minor leagues unless it was a rehab assignment. So,
Well,
you did very late in your career, yeah.
I remember when I was drafted in 1982 out of Florida A&M, and and I was asking. I led the nation in stolen bases for 2 straight years there. So I just knew that I was going to be a first-round draft pick. I mean, that was just about. I knew after leading the nation in stolen bases for 2 straight years, batting over 400. But I went to Florida A&M, a Division II school, HBCU school. So when I was drafted, Marty Meyer came by the house to sign me to this contract, and I had to ask him how come I went so late in the 10th round, and he said, well, your level of competition wasn't like you went to Stanford or UCLA or USC, and so your competition level. I say, well, you know what? I'm gonna take that very personal, and every time I get on, I'm stealing. And there's nothing else you can do about it. So I remember being down in Johnson City, Tennessee, my first year, and the score was 15-0, and so it was like it was like the 5th inning, and I stole second, stole third. Next pitch, they hit Terry Pendleton. So Rich Hack, I came in and a fight broke out. So and then it's well, Vince. You can't steal. That's called showing the team up. I said, where I'm from, that called kill a mosquito with an axe. Yeah, but when I got called up, Del Maxwell stopped me in the hallway as I was leading down to see Whitey, and he said, well, you're not going to be here for you're only going to be here for 4 or 5 days until Willie get better. I said, well, pardon me, but there's no way I'm going back once you put me in that lineup, And so when I got to the bench, Whitey told me that I wasn't gonna play the first night. You're gonna play tomorrow morning. We was playing the Expos on a Thursday, and Terry Pendleton was batting second. So I say, TP had been my roommate, for the last 2 years. I say, Terry, I get on. I'm going, right? And he said, of course. So first day I get on, and and to me, base stealing was something that. It was a natural instinct for me. I was always a mischievous kid. I was always out there trying to make things happen, and I knew I was going to, dominate, once I got out there, once I got to the big leagues, because, it was just my nature to go out there and just cause havoc and go out there and just be electric. And blessing of Whitey Herzog gave me that opportunity. I mean, if it wasn't for Whitey, the only rule that Whitey ever gave me was to be on time and give you 100%, 110%. And so that was it. He never said, don't you ever steal. Matter of fact, Whitey got mad at me for not stealing a couple times, So no matter what the score was, I was going to go, so it was just a blessing. That was just a true blessing, and being at the right place at the right time.
Well, it was a real pleasure to sit in that dugout and watch you out on the field creating havoc with the entire National League. You got on a lot and you stole a lot. Unanimous choice for National League Rookie of the Year. Had an incredible season. And this is how I remember. You would get on first in the first inning, leading off, and you would either get a base hit or a walk, or sometimes even hit a routine ground ball and just beat it out for a base hit. And 2 pitches later, you'd be on third base. It's almost like you could say, I'm going to be over there. You can go ahead and try to throw me out if you want, but I'm going, and you'd be on third, and somebody would get a hit or a ground ball the right side, and St. Louis would be up 1-0 right away, and it would set the tone.
I think that I understood me as a baseball player, how I could elevate my game and be electric in the major leagues. And by saying that, I meant that I started switching when I was 22 years old. And
Yeah.
so here I am in the minor leagues with George Kissel every day grinding. And he taught me this formula was that when I got into the batter's box, all I wanted to do was play pepper with the shortstop. So
There you go.
therefore, I'm a little man not trying to play a big man's game.
Right.
So that's one of the things of having bat control, learning how to bunt, knowing how to choke up and put the ball in play and force them to make mistakes. Make them play a simple game of catch, but now they got to put a time limit on it. So all I had to do is keep the ball out of the air, then I would give myself a chance. And so with that being said, every first game, every first inning, that was my goal was to get on to start the game off electric. And I think we took Rick Hummel would always come to me at the end of the year and say, out of 162 games, you got on, say, 45 times the first inning where we scored runs. And that led us into win victories,
Yeah.
So, and we had a great pitching staff, with Cox and Tudor and Joaquin and so
Yeah.
we got them 1 or 2 runs early.
That
It
was
was
enough a
almost like
lot of
that.
times. Yeah.
Yes, that was off a lot of times. Yes, that was absolutely correct. So that was a lot of fun, more fun that you know what, Frank. So when you say I was drafted, but my junior year I was drafted by the Phillies, and Andy Simonek came to me and said, "Well, we're going to draft you." I got drafted like in the 20th round, and if I had signed with you guys, I'd have been with Jeff Stone down there in Spartanburg. Could you imagine? Could you imagine me and Jeff Stone on
Oh
base at the
my.
same time with the Phillies?
That'd been unbelievable. He was quite a base stealer too. Not quite in your
Yeah,
category, but he was a good base stealer. So I would have still got to know you because
right,
you'd have been
exactly.
in Philadelphia. It would have taken me a few years to get there with you, but that's
It
how it
wouldn't have been
happened.
it wouldn't have been the same though. I mean,
No.
St. Louis, it was nothing like St. Louis. It was nothing like
Well,
St.
well, we are both blessed to have been there too. There's no doubt. But before we get into all your baseball career, since the Super Bowl ended, I want to talk about Vince Coleman, the football player, a little bit. So you grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. You went to Florida A&M, played football and baseball there. You were a kicker and punter on the football team, and that you had to be the fastest kicker or punter I ever saw. So you kick off and then go down and tackle the guy.
Well, believe it or not, Frank, coming out of high school, I had no offers in football or baseball. I was just an average guy, but my mom insisted that I had the grades to get in any college. So we
Yeah,
applied for summer school, and this was our strategy coming out of high school, which guys don't even think about today. But my mom was very bright and brilliant, and she's like, "Well, I had no offers in football or baseball, So here I am going to walk on either at Florida State, University of Miami, Bethune-Cookman, or Florida A&M. We're going to submit applications for summer school. The first school, and she said, the first school that accepts you for summer school, that's where you're going." And it was Florida A&M. And so I graduated on a Thursday. I was in summer school that Monday, say
wow,
June 10th. So
amazing.
while I'm there, I see 2 football guys. I go to this class, and then I go to class, and I go to the gym. I start working out because I know I'm a tryout for the football team.
You're right.
And so I see these 2 guys, and they are Donald Shockley and Warren Sadler. And so they were seniors, and they say they was from Jacksonville. And so they say, okay, well, after we lift weights here at Florida on campus here at our weight room, we're going to go over to Florida State, which Florida State was 2 miles down the road. We go into Doak Campbell Stadium, and we go to put on Army boots and go run the bleachers with Army boots on.
Oh
And
my.
then first time I did this, Frank, I tell you, after 5, I was regurgitating. And so they stood over me, looked at me, and like, "Get up, freshman. You can't make our team. You soft. Go back home to Jacksonville." So I looked up. I said, "Get up." And I said to myself, "I can't give up." They said, "You got to finish." So I finished. After that, we go to the track, and we run 850 yards, just striders. Frank, I did this for 3 straight months. The first day of two-a-days for tryouts for the football team, you had to run 4 40-yard dashes, and ran I ran 3 4 2 9. So right away I get their attention on, like, who's this
I
fast
guess,
guy?
yeah.
And so they was like, well, what position you play? So no, I was smart enough to know that I had to do something exceptional well, because you had a lot of other fast guys there, and they wasn't really a passing team. I just wanted to make the team. And
Yeah.
so I was a punter, place kicker in high school. My cousin was a punter for the Minnesota Vikings, Greg Coleman, and I thought it'd been great to have 2 African American punters in the NFL. So that was my dream, was to be a punter in the NFL. So I say I punt, and they like, oh, you punt and kick off, and so that's how I got a scholarship to go to college,
How about that?
a football scholarship. So now here it is, all through my junior year, up until my junior year, I never thought about baseball. I played baseball, but I never thought about baseball. My ambition was to be a football player because I was All-American punter. Ron Starks was over at Florida
Yeah.
State, and he was a guy that I idolized, Ron Stark. And
He was
he would
great.
average, he was awesome. He was awesome. So I carried like a 45-yard average for like 4 straight years, and he was averaging like 58 yards, So now it's time for me to make a decision. Washington Redskins came to me, invited me to minicamp. So I go to minicamp, and so now while I'm there, Bobby Bethard, and I tell everybody the reason why Vince Coleman played baseball, because when I got to camp, I was there in 1982 for 5 days with the Smurfs, Charlie Brown, Art Monk, Joe Theismann, Riggins. They would never let me punt because I was the fastest guy in camp. And they said, well, Bobby Bethard, I said, well, Bobby, if you don't let me punt today, I'm going to go play baseball. And he just thought I was just, kidding, from Florida A&M, I was drafted the year before by the Phillies, but now this was in May. So the June draft is coming up. I said, Bobby, if you don't let me punt today, show you I can punt, I'm going to quit and go play baseball. So now the next day comes, he don't let me punt, and I twist my ankle. And my mom said that maybe that's a blessing in disguise. Maybe you should just go play baseball. The June draft came up. I was drafted by the Cardinals in the 10th round, and the rest was history. But
Yeah.
if Bobby Bethard had let me punt while I was there and made the team as a punter, I would have never played baseball.
Well, if I was him, I wouldn't let you punt either, as fast as you are. But you mentioned your cousin Greg Coleman. You used to talk about him quite a bit when you were with us there in St. Louis. He had a great 12-year NFL career. He also went to Florida A&M, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I went
Yeah.
there and broke all his records.
There you go. So while you were on the Rattlers football team, you guys won what was then known as the NCAA Division I
Championship.
AA National Championship. Now it's the FCS National Championship. But you guys were national champs. You were all conference in 80 and 81 yourself. But I'd say about 20, 25 years ago, I was sitting in my room in Miami, there with the Phillies. We had a game. It was I think it was Saturday morning. I was reading the newspaper, and it was the beginning of the college football season. And so I was very interested in all the college football coverage, and the games were going to be coming on in another hour or two on TV, and go watch a little football before I went to the ballpark. And that week, Florida A&M was playing the University of Miami. So it says, big story about the game, and it said the last time it happened. And it said the last time Florida A&M beat the University of Miami was on a 34-yard field goal by Vince Coleman. And it literally jumped off the newspaper at me.
Right.
I mean, I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. So that was in 1979, and you you kicked a field goal and beat the Hurricanes, and you guys were no slouch. You were the defending champs, so you guys could play some football over there.
Yeah, we came off a great championship year, but that year wasn't as quite as exciting as was. I think we won like 7 games and lost maybe 3 or 4. But one of the games we did win was, playing against Miami was always a big time rivalry game, because being there in Florida for anytime you played Florida, Miami, and University of Florida, was you was the little brother, but at this point, we wanted to prove we was just as good as you, So, but when we beat them that particular time, that was just a monumental time for Florida A&M, and I just so happened to be in that position to kick that game-winning field goal, So, to this day, that
down
always,
in the Orange Bowl, right? That game had to be on the road for you guys.
Right. Yeah. No. That was at Florida State. It was in
Tallahassee.
There. Okay. Yeah, it was in Tallahassee. But every time, Frank, if for 4 years, whenever I played in the in the Orange Bowl, I was the punter, place kicker. I was the MVP. Believe it or not. So all the other years we got slaughtered. I mean,
right.
we slaughtered. But I would punt like 11 punts with like an average of 65 yards or something like that. Something ridiculous. It was once it was a ball snapped over my head and I recovered it and picked it up and ran for about 55 yards or something like that. But I was always the MVP of the game. Something about the Orange Bowl, I love punting and kicking off. Well, punting. We did more punting off than kicking off because we never scored any touchdowns. That was, the hang time there was always. I looked like Ray Guy. I was like Ray Guy.
Well, after that game-winning field goal, I'm pretty sure you were the most popular guy on campus for a while.
Well, but till this day, and when I go back home, I go to a game every year down in Tallahassee. It's always like I'm known as a football player, not a baseball player, in Tallahassee. So, but which I love football. I coming up, in Jacksonville, I grew up with like Bob Hayes and Harold Carmichael, Kenny Burroughs, Boobie Clark. Today, the later versions, you would know Brian Dawkins. We all went to the same high school. Vernier Scholes, Bar Gaffney, Lito Shepherd, all went to the same. So coming up in Jacksonville in one part, Terry LeCount, Derek Gaffney, my cousin Greg, you all was a football player. And so baseball was just something to do, like the pastime during the summer.
Yeah.
So what gave me the spotlight in baseball, and Marty Meyer will tell you this story, was that he was in town to watch David Ledbetter over at Florida State.
Yeah, I remember him.
And so they had a rain out. And so he was in the hotel and we had a game that night. He came to a game, was playing Alabama A&M. I stole 7 bases in one game. And that's what caught his attention. He's like, who is this guy? So he put me on his radar, and obviously, I stayed there for a long, long time. But the thing is that you had more scouts coming around there because I played with Hank Aaron's son. Okay. Hank Aaron's son, Larry, was on our team, and then that was one of the things that gave me a platform, because all the scouts would come see him play, but then I kind of like stole the spotlight from him.
Well, we're going to come back to Vince Coleman's baseball career right after this. Okay, we're back here with Vince Coleman, and we just talked all about his great exploits in football and college football at Florida A&M. And now we're going to talk about a lot more, in fact, about Vince Coleman, the baseball player. So as we said, drafted in 82 by the Cardinals. In 1983, you're playing in Macon, Georgia. You stole an incredible 145 bases, and I read that you missed a month with a broken hand. Is that right?
I broke a bone in my hand sliding into third base. And at the time, I may have had like 50 stolen bases, and it was right like a month before um, the All Star break. So I set out like 5 weeks prior to All Star game, right?
My goodness.
My first game back was the All Star game. I go 5 for 5 and steal 5 bases. And so right after that game, I see Lee Thomas. I say, Lee, I'm ready to go to Double A, man. Come on, man, put me in Double A, man. He's like, no, 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 no. You gonna stay here. They want you to here and make it. And I say, okay, I'm still every time I get on. You know that. So I ended up stealing 145 bases. That was so much fun playing for Lord Merritt. Lord Merritt was the best.
Nice man. Yeah.
Great guy, great guy. I enjoyed coming to the ballpark. I mean, that was, I love playing baseball so much. Was that, you know, I dreamt about it. I prepared for it day in and day out. But the key for me was being with Don Blasingame. I said, I refuse to let anyone say I stole bases because I was fast. I tell everybody I stole bases, and this is the truth because I was smart. I mean, because Don Blasingame taught me the tips and the flaws and the tendencies that pitchers may have. I did a lot of study on that, So there was when you back in the day, so they say analytics this day, but I had analytics back then because I had film. And Don, what he would do, he would have video all left-handed pitchers, and he put them up on the screen. And no one really knows about this because other than just me and Terry Pellins and probably Bobby Meacham, that Kurt Ford, that we was in the minor leagues, that he taught us how to dissect left-handed pitchers. Every pitcher had a flaw from your head to your hands to your knees to your feet. And a lot of them was in their setup. Bruce Hurst, Honeycutt, I can tell you when they was going to first, whether they was going to the home plate just by their setup. So it's a lot of my detail was put into the picture of his flaws and his tips and tendencies. So when my bases were stolen before I even got on base, my job was just to get on base. Once I got on base, you couldn't stop me. You can only try to contain me. So today's game, you only could throw over twice. Oh my God. I experienced one time where they threw over 17 straight times. Chris Welch with the Reds, and then I went on the 18th time. So
Right.
it was a lot of fun.
Well, and don't forget the bases are now as big as an extra large pizza box.
Yeah.
So you'd have gotten quite a few more because the bases were bigger too.
I tell everybody, opposed to taking 11 steps, I take 9 steps now.
Right. That's right. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a quick one here. We had this shoe rep. Converse was trying to really popularize their baseball shoes back in 1983, and we had this guy. I can't remember his last name. First name was Jerry. Really nice guy. He was in the St. Louis area, and he was trying to get players to wear their shoes. And I said to him one day, I said, if I were you, I would call your boss and send as many shoes as you can to this Coleman guy down in Macon, Georgia. If you really want to get in, that's the guy to get in with. And I don't think that ever materialized, but I was on to something.
Yeah.
I said, he has got like 130 stolen bases, and it's the 4th of July or something. I don't know. It was ridiculous. But anyway, 83, you were in Macon. In 84, you're in Louisville. AAA, that's a huge jump. 101 stolen bases. Getting on base all the time. The next year, 10 days into the season, you're in St. Louis and in the starting lineup, and you never left it. And Cardinals win the National League Championship that year, 101 win season, make the playoffs and eventually the World Series. And Vince, I got to ask you this. Don't be mad at me. You're the fastest guy I ever saw, but how in the heck did a tarp going 1 mile an hour run over your leg? I'd like to hear your take on the whole thing.
That's $1 million question. If I had a quarter for every time I've been asked that question, I'd be a millionaire. But It was just one of those things that, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't see it, and I couldn't hear it. So my back was towards it, but I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was 3 inches closer to the tarp than Terry Pendleton was
Yeah.
because we
Let
was
me, let
just
me stop you 1 second and explain to the listeners. St. Louis Bush Stadium had a tarp. We had an artificial turf field that would raise up out of the ground along the first baseline and automatically roll itself out onto the field whenever rain was coming. And rain was coming prior to game 4 of the National League Championship Series against the Dodgers. And there's a guy down in a pit operating that
yes on the
controller,
trolley.
and he couldn't see you or hear you or anything. Now go ahead with your
Oh,
story, because most
I,
people
I
don't know about that tarp.
well, yeah, you're right. It comes up right at the foul line of first base.
Right.
Say 2 feet behind it, and I was standing right at the foul line. Terry Pendleton and I was just standing there because it began to drizzle. Now, in defense to the gentleman that was trolling it, he didn't see us, and maybe we shouldn't have been there, but we standing there. But I could say that when they say you in fear of your life, you don't feel a thing. That's true because once it knocked me down, I realized what was going on. I'm on the ground and I could feel this ton of metal just rolling on top of me. Now I could not feel a thing because I'm thinking it's not going to stop, and it was all the way up to my hip. So
Yeah.
they finally stopped it, and
Hey,
now they like the whole team was out there by this time was trying to lift it, and they could
yeah.
not lift budget. So now we say, okay, we're going to re-roll it back off, and that's when I felt the pain of it re-rolling back off, and it had us when I couldn't walk, but so they take me inside, and and so now this time, it's right before the playoff was about to start. It was game 4, I believe, game
Yeah.
4,
Yeah.
and so now it had hit the news and
Oh
breaking
yeah.
news, and now my mom get word. She calls, and they let me speak to my mom while I'm sitting there on the line there on the table, and I said, "Mom, I'll be okay." And so the funniest part was that when Bob Force comes in, right? And so Bob Force comes in and he looks at me. He's like, "Vince, you were scared, wasn't you?" I say, "Hell yeah, I was scared." He said, "I know you were." He said, "I never seen a black man turn white."
Well, I tell
so,
you
so
what, everybody was scared that night. That was a horrific injury.
But you know what,
Uh,
Frank? I was able to get off, and I could jog a little bit. But Whitey was like, "Well, just be careful. We're not going to play you tonight." I said, "I'll
yeah.
be all right." Whitey he said, "No, no, no, no. Just take it easy." And they put Tito Landrum in. Tito
And he
Landrum
had a
went.
great night.
Yeah, he had 4 for 4 that night. Yes, yes,
Right. He
yes.
did. He did. Well,
So,
and he did a great job. And with all due respect to him, but the way that team was set up, and like I said earlier, in that first inning, you'd get on, and 2 pitches later, it seemed like you'd be on third. That changed the dynamic of the game all the time. And we were
yes.
fortunate. We won the NLCS and went to the World Series, but the Cardinals certainly missed you in the lineup. No doubt.
Oh, no doubt. I want to go back to when you said about Louisville. That Louisville team was just outstanding team. We had a great team there, and led by Jim Pagosi. Jim
Yeah.
Pagosi was a guy that loved me, believed in me, always encouraged me, and he was the one that was really really helped. I think, instill in me that I could be a major league baseball player. I mean, like every day gave me confidence that I can go out there and continue to work hard. Because he'd been a baseball player at major leagues himself.
A
And
good
I had
one. Yeah.
I had Gene Roof batting behind me. Gene
Yeah.
Roof was an excellent teammate. That encouraged me. So I had all this big league knowledge and experience, and we went on and won that year as well.
You
So I
won
just
the
want to say,
American Association, right? You
yes,
won the
we won.
title.
Yes, we
Yeah.
won. We won that. But yeah, but to go forward and say, well, the tarp was a big incident, and that's what propelled us, and we didn't do well without me in that lineup, and that just shows that the my presence meant a lot by being on base because once we got to the World Series, we only, as a team, only batted like 145 or
Yeah.
something of that nature. And, Buddy Black and Saber Hagan and Danny Jackson kind of
Yeah.
like dominated. And so, it was a lot different, when I wasn't on base and Ozzie couldn't get the fastball and Willie couldn't get Tommy Hurd, they couldn't get the fastballs because that changed the whole dynamic of our strategy of how we approach teams and a team approached us because they couldn't afford to throw off speed pitches when I was at base. So,
Right.
and if you look at the stats that Ozzie became a great hitter when I was on base.
Yeah.
Willie McGee batted 350, when I was on base, and Tommy Hurd batted, with 118 RBIs and only 8 home runs when I was on base. So we had a great team, and knowing Jack Clark, I mean, so it was a great team effort that was put together, great assembly line that was there, it's nothing like it. I mean, we stole over 300 bases that year. The best base running team ever been assembled in
Oh,
baseball.
no doubt. It was like a track team. We should have had T-shirts like Cardinals track and field or something. It would have been
Yeah,
funny to have, but looking
right,
back now, we should have had some of that made up.
right. I tell you what, who felt the pressure with opposing pitchers? As now I go out, and golf has given me the opportunity to go out and be good friends with a lot of Rick Rhoden and Sutcliffe, and so they would always say, "Man, we hate it coming into St. Louis because we had to worry about you guys." And
Oh
the
yeah.
smartest guy, like even Greg Maddox, he was like, "My God, I didn't even think about you when you got on base. I never threw over, tried to pick you off, and he didn't. He wasn't the
Right.
guy that tried to pick me off, so I didn't take him out of his game.
He
So
was just trying to get the next three guys out.
exactly.
Yeah. So moving on, in '86 and '87, you stole over 100 bases again. The only player in the 20th century to have three consecutive seasons of 100 or more stolen bases. It's just pretty incredible. 87, another National League championship. Went to the World Series, fell short in 7 games to Minnesota. You had a great year. You hit 289, 180 hits, 109 stolen bases that year, and scored 121 runs. And I noticed this too. I didn't realize this at the time. You were the first player to throw out 2 runners at the plate, and both of those were in Game 7 of that World Series. I didn't realize that.
Well, preparation is the key to success, and I think that we was prepared each and every day, starting from when we came up to the major leagues. And so, taking infield every day, throwing to hitting the cutoff man,
And they
running
don't do that anymore. Nobody
and,
takes
and,
infield.
and that's my whole point, Frank, is that no one takes infield anymore. No one throws to the cutoff man every day. No one run the bases doing batting practice to
Yeah,
get the read off the bat, to get the jumps, the lead,
yeah,
to set up the delay steals, to go in balls in the dirt, to score from second on base. So those fundamentals of the game was prepared for when big moments. When there was times for the World Series, when the spotlights was on, you always was ready to go out and prepare for that moment and dominate. So just play the game. Also, all I was doing, Frank, was just playing the game the way it should be played in execution. And I live for that moment. My rookie year, I had 17 assists, and with the 17 assists, mean that I was second to Glenn Wilson and 7, and that was something I always pride myself in defense. Taking balls off the bat, doing batting practice. Watching Willie McGee, Van Van Slyke was the best fundamentally sound outfielder I ever seen that I played with, that I mimicked myself behind day in and day out. Ozzie taking ground balls off his knees every
yeah.
day, so those are the things we prepared for. So when it came to being a baseball player, we was that guy. We was that guy that came out every day to prepare to be that baseball player. And consistency is the most important word that's associated with the game of baseball. How to minimize your negatives and maximize your positives. And those are the things that we put pride in. And I never ever want to embarrass myself. I just want to be the best. And so I felt if I didn't go out and play that day. And Ozzy used to always say, no off days for excellence. That meaning everything that we did. And so and we kind of followed that metro throughout my career.
Pretty good leader right there. All the way to the Hall of Fame. Anyway, you left the Cardinals after the '90 season, signed with the Mets, spent 3 years in New York, got traded to the Royals. You were there '94 and until mid of '95, then went over to Seattle, and you guys got in the playoff that year. I remember you had an exciting game to end the season to get in the playoffs. I believe it was right.
The Yankees.
Yeah, and you won that
Yankees.
game. Yeah,
Yeah, we won that game, right. When Edgar Martinez drove in King Griffey Jr.
yeah.
From first base. You know, so that was an exciting game. I mean, that was great going over there playing with, I should say, Edgar Martinez, Tino Martinez, Jay Bruner, King Griffey
Griffey.
Jr.
Yeah,
You know, being back on turf, I was kind of rejuvenated by going back over there. You know, and had the big unit pitching. You know, so you had excitement in the air. You know, when I got there, you know, they was in fourth place, and I had just was let go from. I was having a great year over in Kansas City and All-Star break. I was batting almost 280 and had like 30, 40 stolen bases and All-Star break. And they made a youth movement and brought up Johnny Damien, you know. And so, but I was picked up the next day by by Lou Piniella over
yeah.
with Seattle, and that kind of I mean, helped my career, you know, continue to go on. And but I was dealing with a lot of injuries over when I went to the Mets and being over there. Didn't have great years there just because I was dealing with hamstring issues and trying to come back too fast. Um, and then when you get a big contract and
Yeah.
things happen over there, you know, the media,
pressure. Yeah,
you know,
pressure to get out there.
and absolutely, and I didn't give myself a chance. You know, back then, you know, you didn't have the doctor or the conditioning coaches. You sort of like did it on your own. You know, and I was thinking that, you know, hey, look, I need to get out on the field and play. You know, so opposed to me taking, you know, a month off, I was taking like 12 days off, and that wasn't really enough. And I kept back to back years. I re-injured my hamstrings, and that really hurt me. You know, so.
Well, the injuries definitely played a part in the latter parts of your career. '96, you're with Cincinnati for a while. They let you go in June. It says you signed briefly with the Angels, but never played for them. And then in '97 with the Detroit Tigers for a little bit, and then let go early in the season. '98, you attempted to come back with the Cardinals. You had a great spring, didn't make the team though, and went down to AAA, played there for about a month, and decided to retire. All in all, a great career. Just about 13 years in the big leagues as a really good big league outfielder and a base stealing a champion without a doubt. As we said before, the '85 Rookie of the Year. You were a two-time All-Star in '88 and '89. You stole a record 50 consecutive stolen bases without being thrown out. Still a record. And if they had those big bases like they do now, and they could only throw over twice, you might still be stealing bases. But elected to the Cardinals Hall of Fame, which is very prestigious, in 2018. And then long before that, and rightly so, in the Florida State A&M Hall of Fame. Vince, you've had some career and some life, man.
Thank you that's a lot to be said from a little country boy from Jacksonville that never knew where life would take him, but I knew that as long as I worked hard and had inspirations of being good at whatever I choose to do. And you know, the thing about, I tell my kids, the choices you make between the ages of 14 and 21 is how you live the rest of your life. And I think that I doesn't say I think, I knew that I had great advice from my mom, and she gave me great inspiration. Whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve it, and you can believe it. So I thank God for the opportunity to have played and to attend at Florida A&M, and Florida A&M really helped mold me and gave me direction on how to be a champion, how to be the best version of myself, by working hard. And I think work ethics is something that wasn't, given to me. I had to earn it, and I had to prove myself day in and day out. And till this day, when I go to the golf course, I'm out there trying to grind and practice and try to be best, So I think that's some of the things that, I wasn't entitled growing up, so coming out of where I'm from, it was a lot of hard work and effort because, I didn't want to go back to where I was. I want to go out and see the world and then enjoy it.
And you've been able to do that. And I know you want to go tee it up here in a little bit. So we're going to let you go, but I can't thank you enough for being our guest today. I really appreciate you making the time to do it. And it's been a lot of fun catching up and reminiscing on our time together there in St. Louis in particular.
Well, Frank, you go through life and you meet a lot of people, and, you can really say you love a lot of people, you know what I mean? Because I know that if it wasn't for the love that I have for you, I wouldn't be here today. And the love that you showed me as a person, that go back to 1985 and know the years that we spent together, it was very, very special to me and very dear in my heart.
Great memories for me as well, buddy. All the best, and thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please follow, like, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network, and we'll be back next week with another exciting guest.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.